Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I am the host of this show. My guest today is Dennis Gorya, and I'll tell you a little bit more about him in a second, but he is the CEO, founder, and partner behind Tidal Commerce. It is an elite Shopify Plus partner and expert in managed commerce services, and we'll talk all about that fast-growing company that he's been heading out of Toronto, Canada. But first, before we get to that, this episode brought to you by my company, Rise 25, where we help B2B companies get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. You can learn all about it at rise25.com. And also, this is part of our EMP series, the Entrepreneurial Masters program. Dennis and I are both attending it this year, so we're both excited about that. It's a 3-year-long, highly specialized training program for members of Entrepreneurs Organization. It takes a diverse group of about 70 EO members on a 3-year learning journey, learning from thought leaders, experts, and peers on personal and professional growth around a number of different pillars. And so you can learn more about that. Just Google it. EMP is the name of the program. All right, my guest here today is Dennis Gorya. He's an accomplished entrepreneur and leader. He's the CEO, as I said, CEO and founder and partner behind Tidal Commerce and also another company called Umbrella, which we'll be talking about in a moment. They help other companies with various different e-commerce strategies and also digital transformation, which is a popular topic these days. And Dennis, I'm excited to have you here today. First of all, I love asking people about entrepreneurial endeavors as a kid, what sorts of things they did. And I've never had an answer quite like this before. But you had some kids that unfortunately in your school had leukemia, and you went out and out of the kindness of your own heart, making and selling bracelets, and the principal or something cracked down on you guys. That is, I mean, what the heck is going on? Like, talk about a good deed going unrewarded. Like, why did they crack down on you guys when you're trying to go to doing a good deed?
I think it was probably a misunderstanding, a grand understanding. Usually things of that nature are. But they, for some reason, just saw us, trading bracelets for money on the schoolyard. And they probably made the wrong assumption that these are no good kids. So, through that, obviously, they quickly found out the truth of why these kids were giving us money. And we were obviously in the same grades, right? So through that experience, then they decided to donate the money finally to a sick kids hospital. But I think at least the money got to the right place. I don't really remember. Yeah, exactly, right. And I don't really remember what the motivation behind it was, but it's like there was just like a somber mood. Yeah. And
you also got into magic as a kid, and that kind of became a side hustle for you. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it was a side hustle and then became basically a full-time thing for a little while. So started at age, say 12 or 13, worked at a magic shop and basically worked there for about 3 or 4 years. Kind of went behind the counter and just decided to start selling stuff. My basically either my grandfather or my mother would just drop me off on the weekend, and I would just kind of sneak behind the counter as it was a busy day and start selling stuff. And all of a sudden the owner would realize, why are my sales double? So eventually, he kind of added it up and then offered me, I think, $50 a weekend or something like that, which was just enough for my bus fare, some lunch or something like that, and a little bit of pocket change. So it gave me an opportunity just to save up a little bit, buy my first piece of technology, like my first phone, I think it was, and some stuff like that.
And so in college, and you're still a young guy, but in college, you actually studied business, you studied entrepreneurship. So you knew you were interested in being an entrepreneur. Was there a moment or something that inspired you to go into entrepreneurship, or is it just kind of who you were?
Yeah, I actually wanted to go to a design school, so I was kind of got accepted to that, and had full scholarships and stuff like that. Had really good marks getting out of high school, so it was kind of a little bit tempting to go there because everything was going to get paid for at a design school. They were kind of just luring in students. So this particular one was called OCAD here in Ontario. It's just kind of more in Toronto core, which is a little further from me. So that's one part of the decision, and the other part was just very controlling parents, Russian Ukrainian parents. Go figure. The inner
Wow.
conflict on that one is very interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
especially now.
yeah, exactly, right. And then on top of that, they're just like, "Are you crazy? You're gonna." So at times I sort of egg on my mother to say, "You know what? I'm just gonna drop out of business school. I'm gonna become a hairdresser or something like that," right? And she would just get a heart attack for things like that. But I stuck into business school. It was a great decision overall. I had a blast, and this particular school was a very, very difficult one in Canada to get into. So it was definitely had a little bit of kind of the prestige behind it. But I quickly learned being an entrepreneur, no one really gives a shit where you went to school.
Yeah.
I've hired plenty of MBAs from my school that ended up being no good. I just had to I had to cut that fairly quickly. And then I've also hired professors from our school who are, of course, fantastic, right? Because I would not hire them. I've kind of been through their classes. So it was a different
Yeah.
introspective moment to see sort of on the other side of on the table, working with your prof, literally them as a consultant or as a staff. It's very interesting and very
That's an
enlightening.
interesting changing of turning the tables. I want to get back to that. And you also got your mentor involved and became business partners with your mentor, which is also something I'm fascinated with when people, have a mentor and then they go into business together with them. But first, how did you get into you started an agency during your end of your first year in college, in addition to studying at the same time. Had you done e-commerce before, or how did you end up in starting an agency? Or is it just kind of a situation
Yeah.
of I'm going to figure this out as I go along?
A little bit of both. So prior to starting an agency, getting into, I would say, first year, maybe last year of high school, I started a clothing company, which is sort of what I used to be able to pay my way through school. So I scaled that to a certain degree, and it was the business model was simple. I didn't have any capital to really put into creating samples or blanks or whatever. So I decided the only way I could really make money was through volume sales. And the niche I found was like not-for-profits, school clubs, things like that that would order, say, 100
Larger.
pieces. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, something like that. And I just offer them, I would design for free. So it
Mm.
cost me nothing to design, it's just my time. And then I would just make the margin off those sales. And then it's usually a recurring customer, right? So it's just, for whatever events they're going to put on during the year. Through that, like I was able to make enough money to pay my way through school, but it gave me the skill of like creating my website. I had to do a Kickstarter, which flopped. There's a lot of mistakes, and it just gave
Mm.
me a really safe opportunity to fail fast and a lot. Before that, I came from working at, two other kind of opportunities. One was through development, like working on super custom big applications, enterprise applications for like Samsung and Rogers, which is like the big telco we have here in Canada. Then I worked in sales, working on like enterprise sales for cybersecurity appliances and Wi-Fi, right? This was at a very early age. So getting into the entrepreneurship, running my own shop, and then making those mistakes, kind of taking all those learnings along with me was effectively like my poor man's MBA before even getting into university. So getting into uni felt like a little bit of more of a breeze until I got into like hardcore stats and accounting. Then I felt like a complete dumbass. I felt like, they're like debit, credit. My first question is like, excuse me, who's doctor? Like, who's the doctor? And the kids are like, the fuck, let this idiot in, like, who is this kid? So through that experience, basically kind of taught me a lot more about how to study smart instead of hard. So I had to kind of let a few classes go. Macroeconomics, microeconomics was never a thing for me. I somehow like, blindfolded on, like got an 80 on one of the tests. I thought I got cocky. I'm like, I'm going to do this again. The next one was like a 30, right? So like I eventually kind of got through. So got still honor roll somehow, still got honor roll through the school, which was a difficult accomplishment in
Yeah.
itself because it's a pretty well known school, hardcore profs. But through that in second year of uni, that's where I felt again bored. Like I think just as entrepreneurs, and I think I have a certain level of ADHD, not diagnosed, but just
Yeah,
from that.
interested in different things. Well, let me ask you about the clothing company. It's interesting because when you said you started a clothing company, I was starting to think, well, man, that is hard because it tends to be very capital intensive. You got to manufacture, design, create, ship all this product before you make any sales, and a lot of times the cash cycle is slow because it comes on the back end. But you figured out a way to invert all that, which is really interesting. I'm wondering if that was, how you came up with that solution, or if it was just kind of a product of figuring things out. Because a lot of people struggle with that, or they build a business and then they only later realize, geez, the problem here is that we get paid way on the back end. So we have to have a lot of money on the front end.
Yeah, I figured I tried both, to be honest. I mean, I did a lot of sourcing. I found some suppliers in Canada and still have them as contacts, funny enough. And but the main thing was just necessity, I think. So, drop shipping was just coming out at that point in time. I think Printful was just brand new. So there was like not a lot of education around what drop shipping was and what it wasn't. So in my particular case, I just kind of leveraged that to say, you know what, the main value here is the service, it's the quality, the speed, and it's the design. Um, I don't think the event organizers really care if the people complain about, oh, this is not a Pima cotton. It's like, you get what you take,
Yeah.
go away.
Yeah.
So that kind of mentality behind the events, or the main ideal customer profile in a nutshell, was like, it was ideal for that particular thing. I don't think it would work in this climate because there's just so much of these promotional marketing sellers of like, oh, you want to buy customized pens, you want to buy a t-shirt, they'll sell you everything in the moon, right? um yeah, for me it was just kind of, I think also the pricing was pretty right because I was willing just to sort of, it was just me. I just need to cover my costs, right? So and my costs were my tuitions effectively.
Yeah. 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 And so, and then tell me about this. The agency gets started, and what point are you hiring professors and you're hiring MBAs, and what was that like? Because that's interesting that you're a couple of years in, you're hiring your former professors.
Yeah, I would say at the year that when I graduated, I had then asked one of my profs. She was like one of my favorite sort of professors, still is, and she had a class that she would teach. It was, I think, an extracurricular. It was a credited course, and I think there was extracurriculars outside of class about case competition. So it gave me an opportunity to travel a bit, to learn how to present well, how to make a case in a business setting, and things like that. And it was kind of generally fun as well. Um, so I asked her on the last day, I'm like, hey, I'm just working on different stuff. I have Vicky, who's my mentor, and I would love to introduce you. And just one thing led to another. I made the introduction, and Vicky was looking for some help on a sort of strategic side. Dave, who's Vicky's business partner at that point, this title was not fully formed as an agency at this point yet. This was just kind of like a little bit before that fully finalized. So then she joined the team with Vicky to help with the business development strategic kind of alignment. She came from a big pedigree in advertising, and just a lot of great things she's done. So she has an incredible strategic mind and marketing research as well, very talented in that. So we took that, and I just had a great opportunity working with her directly as well. So that was more, I think, on the hardware and solution side. And today she's still working with us as a director of business development, which is her title, but she's more kind of working on, I would say, from what I see, as more high level strategic initiatives, right? So that's a different strategic business unit within our umbrella group. So under title, within like on my end, one of my partners, Aziz, who's our CMO as well, he's actually a professor at U of T today. He's a professor at Ryerson as well. It's part of his passion. It's his way of giving back to the community, his way of, I guess one of his talents. And it's not a negative. I don't take it this way. It's preaching. Some people are very good at preaching and educating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think he's very talented at that, right? So he I think he kind of gets something out of it too. I can see kind of like a spark in his eye every time he talks about teaching. So that's another one. And then Jane Michelle afterwards, so director of business development, then brought another consultant to us who happened to be another professor of mine, who I also had a great time with. So it was just a great kind of small world moment. But
Have you had any
overall, I wouldn't say.
awkward conversations? I mean, yeah, when you're overseeing someone, you hire someone, whether it's as a contractor, an employee, or whatever, you have to talk about pay, you have to talk about benefits. I mean, that could be a really difficult conversation to have with anyone, much less former professor. What was that experience like?
Luckily for me, it was kind of handled by Vicky mainly with that relationship. But in terms of like, they're contractors, right? So they still have other interests
Projects.
and stuff like that, right? So, and they're kind of our type where they just need to be busy. I feel like it's just part of their, maybe to a certain extent. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of speaking a lot there, but
and also, Vicky, I want to ask about Vicky too. So you said we were chatting beforehand, and first of all, you said you didn't come from a lot of money. And Vicky has been a CTO for 25 years, has been really a mentor for you. A lot of people are curious about, how do you connect with someone like that, especially at a young age? You said by like age 13 or so, you had connected with them.
Yeah, I was working at the magic shop, and one fine day, Vicky comes in. He's like, "I just came from Las Vegas, and I just spent a lot of money on this shit. So, can you show me something?" So then I just started selling him a bunch of stuff, and then he started complaining to my boss because he came in a couple weeks in succession. He's like, "I just bought the same shit. You're just selling me the same. I just bought the same thing. Hello, like So he starts complaining to my boss, just like, do something about this shit. Like he's selling me triplicates of the same crap, right? So. It's like, well, there you go. He's doing his job well. So, but then afterwards, I introduced him to my parents. So then we became family friends. And because my parents were always like, they're immigrants to the country, they were, as a kind of background culturally, it's not just, it's a little colder, I would say. But because of that, it kind of, Vicky became like a father in my life. So I kind of took a lot of time with him. He sort of took a lot of time out of his day to sort of help me figure out certain things, whether it be business or even personal. So I kind of had a lot of time to pick his brain and just understand, like, oh, why did you do this? What were experience shares? And in another way, it's kind of ended up being a natural form in my life because there's other people. So like, for example, Dave and a good friend of ours, Rob, and then Sam, and then my spouse now, Martin. So it's like, we all have kind of a natural form where we're able to just share. So that's kind of what I get out of EO to a certain extent, but I already have that, right? So it's interesting.
You realize how strange that sounds, right? I was working in a magic shop at 13. This guy comes in, we strike up a conversation. He becomes a friend, and eventually becomes a business partner many years later, right? I mean, that just like sounds a little unusual. And my parents became friends with this guy that I sold stuff to.
There's a wizard in my closet.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a testimony to your wizardry, right? The magic. But do you think that he saw something in you? I mean, what was it? The connection over the shared interest in magic and eventually business? What was it that led to that spark of that becoming such a significant relationship in your life and your career?
Yeah, I think I took a keen interest because he was a successful entrepreneur, and I think he equally. It's like when I meet other EOers, it's like, okay, you just get it. It's like I don't have to freaking explain it. Like you're on the same page to a certain degree, like regardless of what the business or the industry is, right? There's a certain attitude, I think. And I'm of a mindset that everything is interconnected to a certain degree, and there's, a certain simplicity is, certain simplicity to life and how things work, right? So I think to that degree, like what I probably had as a skill set or what he saw was more of like, okay, entrepreneurial, very energetic, has a lot of different mix of skills, whatnot. And then on my end, what I saw was like, okay, that wisdom that I can learn from, and someone that's willing to provide help, right, without any strings attached. Which in our culture is weird. In North America, I find oftentimes it's like, why would you help? Which is like, why not? So
Yeah.
in EO, I see it more often where it's like selfless giving, the whole idea of like give back to your community first. And that kind of, the money will follow. Don't worry about the money. And I think it's been a testament to that, right? Like that's been definitely something we've preached for a while. It's like, serve others and things will kind of fall into place. In 2 years, we've been able to scale the title side fairly successfully, but the other businesses, have done phenomenally well over the past 20 years as well. So the continuous kind of growth around that, like that's what we try to propagate. And I think it's a great message in general. It's like, it's basic foundational stuff that people already know. It's just no one really preaches and lives it in their life, I would say.
Right, right. I've interviewed a number of people that were immigrants to their country, or children of immigrants, and a lot of times they are more scrappy, more innovative, find solutions, more hustlers. How do you think that it affected you being the child of Russian immigrant and Ukrainian immigrant?
Yeah, I would say definitely relevant. Never really had, I guess, I was a middle child, so like I have a brother, an older brother, and a younger sister. So the younger sister would get a lot of like as a middle child, I think we kind of get a little neglected in terms of like and I was pretty, I guess, on my own island anyways. So I kind of ended up going to the magic shop a lot, so it was very siloed in a way, right? So I would never really get any of the true financial help, so to speak. Like I would make a little bit of my own money, buy the stuff I want, right? So I never really had a lot of that freedom, which forced me to make my own money and learn the value of money at a very early age, which is great, I think, for anybody. So with that, was able to save up for my first phone, which was like the iPhone 4, right? And then I got scammed. It was like it's like water damage, right? So someone, kind of a nice favor. Someone gave me a new phone, so they kind of like exchanged it for that because they saw that I was just trying to buy my first phone. So like small things like that, but it definitely helped me be scrappy. I think now it's definitely something I'm trying to keep more rooted in. As you get more successful and as you see a lot more, I think it's very important to keep rooted in those foundations because it's a very slippery slope very quickly, regardless how much money we have, right? Or whatever. It's kind of, I think it's not frugality, but it's just being careful with how you spend.
Right, right. Now, another thing that has been influential is you had one of your bigger contracts early on. One of your early clients early on came from another agency that was a Shopify Plus partner. You weren't a Shopify Plus partner. You developed a relationship with them, ended up doing this big project. Talk a little bit about that project and the significance of that relationship for your business.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, you're killing it with these questions.
Try my best,
John. So that project was probably the second largest like build on Shopify. Probably still is one of the largest on that to date. It was like should have been a cool like over $1 million project. What we ended up probably charging for it, and in terms of like without losses, was probably close to 400,000. So the 600,000 was kind of absorbed learning, so to speak, right? So there's a lot of red there, but in general, the project was a big success. Like it was a big crammed kind of digital transformation project just as the onset of the pandemic. So get a phone call and I'm told that, this other agency as CTO is no longer able to take on this project. They need a team. They don't have any technical expertise in-house, so they don't have any actual developers or anything like that. So I had like a contractor I was working with, and I was able to build my own little bench out of that because I had like the same people I was working with. So we put through like a few projects. Like it was just a smaller operation. So that kind of allowed me to scale it fairly fast. And for that project, I needed like 10 or 12 full-time people for like a year. So we just kind of like crammed through like 12,000 hours or something crazy like that of a project. And eventually the reason it was so complicated was just, it was a very legacy system, kind of driven organization. And there was not enough time to do a full re-architecture of everything. It was like, get it done in 9 months because we're shutting down 70 retail stores that draw in over $100+ million of revenue. So we had to take it now online. So it's like, okay, let's just figure it out. So that kind of all kind of came together, and it was successful. Through the project, we just had a terrible time the way not the client was treating our team, but rather the intermediary, the agency. So we always had this kind of challenge because we were doing all the work, but then we had this kind of guy just in between.
Yeah.
So basically, eventually, we just kind of cut it. We gave the other agency, the guy, we gave him our team. We said, here's the contractors. We did all the work to find these contractors. These are people I've worked with for years. So completely severed that relationship and gave them to that for the benefit of the client, because it's like, this is the client's environment now. Like they need to be treated the best. And then we started from scratch about 2 years ago. So we had to restart.
That's incredible
because of that.
setback. I mean, to lose your team, that's for an agency, that's your asset.
I felt, and I felt so as well. But at the time, I think that's exactly how I felt. But looking back in retrospect, I think it was probably the best thing that happened to us, to sort of reset that way. Because we have now, our CTO is incredibly experienced. Our COO is on the ball. Our CMO is very aligned with what we're doing as well. So it gave us an opportunity to say, let's just take stock of what we have. Outsourced agencies giving us and farming us work is not sustainable. Let's build up our own base. Through that, literally that same, I think a couple of months later, we then signed Drake as a client. Now we're managing all of Drake's properties internationally. October's very own, Drake related, Nocta, Nike, right? So like there's, I find the kind of mentality of like one door closes, another one opens is true, right? But there's a certain level of like that had to happen just for us to be able to have a sane mind, because there's certain things that guy did that you can't take back, right? It's like you can only treat people so badly until it's like, okay, this is just not worth it, at any degree.
Yeah. And then talk about, so your spouse has a business, Umbrella, which is like a business transformation company. That's a big category for a lot of businesses these days. Talk a little bit about how that fits into the business as a whole.
Oh, okay. I see. So Umbrella, actually, just to clarify, is actually an entity that all of us own. So it's not just my spouse's. It's actually primarily, it was Vicky that founded the idea like years ago, like 20 years ago. So he was watching Resident Evil and he saw Umbrella Incorporated. He's like, I gotta get the domain. So he got the domain, and we had a logo made a few years ago. So we always had it kicking around. And then naturally things kind of came together because Titles as sort of my strategic business unit, all about the tide, right? Then you have cloud and rain. Then you have salt strategy, which comes from rain, which comes from tide. Then you have the umbrella. So everything kind of sort of naturally fit together.
I see it. Yeah, makes sense.
Right. We never had that goal for it, right? So my spouse's business is actually his family business, which he's now kind of done an off-site brand. So the initial history behind it was his family's business is in China. They're the largest distributor. We're one of the largest distributors of toys and baby products out of China. So they do private label, they do things like that. So he's taken a lot of that skill set and everything that he's learned, not only through just knowing about it and seeing what his family's done, but also a lot of his own experience. So he worked as a consultant for many years, and he's taken that and then decided to create his own brands. So his hope is now to scale that brand and continue to scale it. So he's done very well in the first year. But the operation of that is basically, it's like one company, which then will have multiple companies under it. And that's his first brand, which is baby products, right? So the company, which is the holding company, is called Apsis. And Apsis is basically what causes a tide. It's the sun, the moon that rotates, right? So so everything still does kind of connect in a way, which is kind of nice, and never was planned that way. But yeah.
It's funny how it all comes together like that. Well, that's really cool. And Dennis, such a pleasure hearing your story and how it's all evolved and everything. I'm looking forward to hanging out with you in about a month or so in Boston. Where can people go to learn more about you, connect with you, reach out if they have any questions?
Please just reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me a message. I'm very approachable, more than happy to help with anything. Part of my mission is definitely just giving back through service, and anything I can do to be helpful to anyone, just shoot me an email. LinkedIn is usually the best place to reach me. And
even
thank
if they
you
have
for
a question
having
about
me,
Drake,
John.
still cool.
As long as it's not a mixtape, yes.
Sounds good. All right, Dennis, thanks so much.
And John, thank you for having me. I really appreciate just the time and the thoughtful questions. It's clear that you put some great effort into putting these together. So thank you.
My pleasure. All right, thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
Revolution.
And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.